The year 2000 problem is an electronic equivalent of El Nino. This is going to have implications in the world and in American society that we can't even comprehend.
What he's talking about is the possibility, some say probability, that on Saturday morning, January 1st, 2000, people will get out of bed and nothing will work. Not the phones, not the elevators, not the cash machines. Tonight, we'll tell you why.
Until recently, hardly anyone knew that 7 million slave laborers were forced to help feed the German...
Computers, and he's making unique preparations. Should you? Eye on America, Monday on the CBS Evening News.
If you want to, there are plenty of things to worry about as we approach the end of the 20th century. Global warming, biological warfare, meteors from outer space, and now Y2K. Y2K is the year 2000 computer glitch that threatens to crash the world's computer networks. It's easy to dismiss as hype, but if this were all hype, government and businesses would not be spending an estimated $600 billion trying to fix it. And in spite of that effort, officials concede we are probably in for a few serious problems and some nasty surprises. Because over the last 50 years, without even realizing it, we have surrendered much of our lives to computers. They send us our bills and keep our records. They control our medications and bring us electronic mail. They open our doors, guide our missiles, even control the fuel mixture in our cars. But now it seems many of them have this little flaw and may not work, or worse, not work properly when we get to the year 2000. The seeds of the problem were sown 50 years ago, when dinosaurs like this old UNIVAC 1 ruled the computing world. Its brain was so small that programmers decided to abbreviate dates to the last two digits. 1968 would become 68, 1999 would become 99, and the year 2000 would become, well, no one was really thinking about the year 2000. But the computer reads the year 2000 as 00. And since 00 comes before 99, the computer may think it's gone back in time 100 years. Or it may read 00 as a signal to shut down altogether. Is this a big problem?
It's a major problem.
This is not some wild-eyed prophet of computer doom. He's the man President Clinton has appointed to manage the Y2K crisis for the federal government. Chances are you've never heard of John Koskinen, but he's been called the most important man in America right now. And he has two worries. One, that exaggerated Y2K fears could cause a panic, and the other, which could be even worse, is that people and businesses might ignore Y2K altogether.
I think if you're not paying attention to this problem, and you're a small to medium-sized enterprise, you're rolling the dice with whether you're going to be in business or not when we move into the year 2000.
The basic problem is that computers have worked so well that we've become so dependent on them. And now they're not going to work so well, and we're just not ready for it.
Dr. Edward Yardeni is chief economist at Deutsche Bank Securities, one of the largest investment banks in the world. He thinks there is a 70% chance that Y2K is going to plunge the world into a global recession, not unlike the one caused by disruption in oil supplies in the early 1970s. Information, Yardeni says, is now almost as important as oil.
I understand how important information is, and I understand how important computers are. What I don't understand is how a little glitch can cause markets to fall, could cause a financial disaster.
It's a very trivial problem. It seems that way. The problem is it's overwhelming. We have, for a couple of decades, 20, 30 years, been putting together a global computer network. And these computers all have to communicate with each other. They all exchange information. So there's sort of a protocol. They shake hands. They agree on the basics, namely what time is it and what's the date. And if they don't agree on that, then one computer may simply refuse to do any business with another computer. And by the time you get this thing fixed, it could be several days, several weeks, could be several months.
There are 100 million interconnected computers around the world. If businesses can't use those computers to get components delivered on time or get paid by their customers, they could be forced into layoffs or even bankruptcy. But computer networks are not the only problem. There are tens of billions of microprocessors, mini-computers, embedded in everything from heart defibrillators,
analyzing heart rhythm,
to microwave ovens. If you fly in airplanes, depend on elevators, are hooked up to a water or sewer system, collect Medicare or Medicaid, visit automated bank tellers, or use electricity, you're likely to have some part of your life disrupted.
Do we know how to fix the problem?
It's really a fairly trivial thing to fix if you're looking at one program. But there's just so much of this stuff all over the place, and so little time left.
The problem is non-negotiable. It can't be solved by throwing money at it, and it can't be postponed.
The year 2000 is approaching at the rate of 3,600 seconds per hour. We know it's coming. We're running out of time. We are making progress, but not as fast as the year 2000 is approaching.
And few people are more aware of the time pressures than the employees of Capgemini in Terrytown, New York, who were in the brand new business of inoculating government and corporate computers against the millennium bug.
444 days, 13 hours, 8 minutes, and 16 seconds before the year 2000.
That's here in New York.
That's here in New York, that's right.
That's 6 more hours than Capgemini's European operation has to try and fix the problem, and Senior Vice President Jim Woodward says he'll need every one of those hours and then some.
What's involved in checking one? Can you show us how you check one?
Well, there's a message here that says low certainty.
The company's clients are mostly banks and Fortune 500 corporations. Its employees are mostly computer programmers.
Track it.
And to understand exactly what they're doing,
And I class it.
you have to be one.
Be a D3M because there's hyphens.
I have to tell you, I don't understand a word you say.
But what you pick up immediately is that the process of fixing a single computer program is tedious and time-consuming. Every one is unique, and you have to go through them line by line to find and fix and test potential problems.
So this is the problem.
That's right. That's right.
Jim Woodward and Noah Ross, who supervises the operation, showed us this millennium bug. Its 2-digit date code would wreak havoc in this program, which runs checking accounts for a commercial bank.
And that would mean that if you put a deposit into your account after January 1st, 2000, expecting to write checks on it, the computer will not recognize that deposit, and when you write your checks, they'll be returned for insufficient funds.
So the bank won't record the deposit?
Right, exactly.
You don't think it's an old deposit from 1900?
Or basically, we'll lose it.
Lose it.
And lost it.
Discard it.
Delete it.
Delete it. Gone.
They had to go through 100,000 lines of programming to find about 200 that needed to be changed. And that's just one program out of 105 submitted by one bank.
What?
It's likely that 80 to 90% of the computers in the United States will be fixed by the year 2000. But that may not be good enough. The 10% that aren't fixed could corrupt and contaminate entire networks. Consider for a moment the Federal Aviation Administration. In the air traffic control centers alone, the FAA has 23 million lines of code to check. And if they miss something, all the screens could lock and the systems go down. The latest report from the General Accounting Office says the FAA is way behind. John Koskinen, the government's Y2K czar, says the system can be run manually, but not without cutting air traffic by 30 to 40%.
I think our problem in air traffic is not going to be the U.S. system. I am very concerned about some of the foreign systems.
In what way?
Whether they, in fact, will be able to be functional. There may be some countries that airlines will decide not to fly to until they are satisfied that the system's up and running in the year 2000.
Consider for a moment that there are thousands of power plants in the United States and Canada connected through computer-run power grids that manage and shift electricity from one place to another. And they're all time and date sensitive. The industry just began trying to assess the problem and won't know whether there is one until next summer.
By then, by the summer of 1999, if we discover that there really are some very serious problems, there won't be enough time to fix it.
But that's not the only thing there may not be time to fix. According to the General Accounting Office, the federal government may not be able to deliver uninterrupted Medicare payments. The Defense Department admits that only 29% of its mission-critical systems currently have a clean bill of health. Deputy Defense Secretary John Hamre had these words of caution for the Senate.
The year 2000 problem is an electronic equivalent of El Nino. This is going to have implications in the world and in American society that we can't even comprehend.
Scott Olmsted and his wife Barbara certainly believe that. He's a former computer programmer who has bought a place in the California desert. He's stockpiling dehydrated food and plans to arm his family against potential looters. And Olmsted is not the only one preparing for the worst. The federal government is printing an extra $50 billion in cash in anticipation of a millennial panic if citizens begin to stuff a little money under the mattress.
If they ever have a stupidity hall of fame for mankind, this is going to be the #1 exhibit. This is the biggest display of stupidity in the history of mankind.
If people had listened to Bill Schoen 14 years ago, none of this would have happened. Schoen is a computer programmer and system designer who has worked for the big three Detroit automakers. In 1984, he became the Paul Revere of Y2K, when Computer World magazine carried a story about his warnings of a year 2000 computer crash. At the time, the magazine was on the desk of every computer programmer in the country.
I presume that all of the experts and the honchos and all of them would see this, and then they'd all, in an instant, say, oh, yeah, this has got to be done.
But that didn't happen.
No. What happened was big, fat nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Not a single mention of the year 2000 by the #1 expert.
Schoen says it was a classic case of an idea being way too far ahead of its time. All of the people in data processing have known about it for years, but none of them wanted to tell their boss.
If I was the head systems person for a company, would I want to go to the CEO and say, hey, Joe, we got this little problem here. We've known about it for 20 years, and if I knew I was going to retire in 1996, would I bear that news to the CEO? No, none of them did.
Now, of course, everyone has heard the news. Bill Schoen has even written a song about it.
The millennium bug is waiting, invisible is he. His eyes are dark, his teeth are sharp.
He's tried a couple of times unsuccessfully to make a fortune from his foresight. Now, finally, he sees a way to ease his retirement, not by fixing the problem, but by offering testimony on behalf of plaintiffs damaged by the whole fiasco.
The year 2000 is scheduled to be the biggest single litigation event in history.
Because?
Because there are going to be so many failures.
And people are going to sue.
They're going to get hurt and they're going to sue.
But if anybody needed an expert witness to say this was preventable,
then I'm their man.
What does all this say about the relationship between man and machine at the dawn of a new millennium? For answers, we went to Professor Michael Dertouzis, the head of the Computer Science Laboratory at MIT, and one of the nation's leading thinkers about computers and their role.
how serious is this going to be, do you think?
I think we're going to have a few pretty bad situations. A few. But I don't think it's going to be the catastrophe that the panic creating people are talking about. The problem deep down is that nobody really knows.
But Dertouzis says don't blame all this on the computer. This is a human error.
The angels and the devils are not always in the machine. They're within you and me.
What does it say about human nature?
It says that it hasn't changed for 4,000 years or more.
In what way?
Well, we as humans are fallible, and we're not omniscient, and we can't anticipate everything. So every now and then we blow it.
If you're wondering what all this means for your home computer, you need to check with the people who manufactured it and the people who provide your software.
For 12 years, he successfully managed a 1,000-acre farm for a local white landowner. But Ross wanted to farm on his own.
I wanted more out of life than just staying there on a farm, getting a basic farm salary, and I wanted to have a future in farming just as my grandfather and the people before him did.
So in 1991, Ross, like most other small farmers in the area, black and white, went to the local office of the Department of Agriculture to apply for a loan. He needed the money to buy seed and rent equipment so he could farm 775 acres of land for himself, money he would eventually pay back when his crop went to market. But the committee, 3 locally elected white men, turned him down.
They just said it was inadequate management ability to farm a farm of that size.
Did you talk to them? Did you say, look, I've been farming 1,000 acres over here?
Yes.
For 12 years?
Yes.
How did you feel when they turned you down?
It really was a big disappointment to my family and the community where I live.
Ross felt he had been unfairly rejected, so he filed a discrimination complaint with the Agriculture Department's state office. But by the time it ruled in his favor, it was too late to plant. So Ross waited and reapplied the following year, and again the year after that. Each year after being turned down, he filed a civil rights complaint. Finally, in 1993, the local committee granted Ross a loan.
I got the money on time, and mid-season, in July, while the...
I just hear from him this year.
13, 14 years later.
That's right.
That's when Brown got this letter saying the Office of Civil Rights was continuing to process his complaint. After your experience with Charlie Featherstone, did you continue to borrow money from the Department of Agriculture?
They wouldn't lend me money.
Why?
They said I didn't qualify.
And where do you get credit from today?
Oh, I got all kind of credit today. I even have a platinum credit card.
So you have a platinum credit card with a line of credit of
$18,600, I believe.
$18,600.
Sure do.
Yet Charlie Featherstone didn't want to give you any money.
He didn't want to give me any money.
Today, Brown, who says he'll never have anything to do with the government again, has signed on to a $2.5 billion class action lawsuit against the Agriculture Department for past discrimination. Some 600 other black farmers have already joined the suit. J.L. Chestnut, at one time a lawyer for Dr. Martin Luther King, is one of their attorneys.
And we are living at a time when anywhere you listen, there are folk who saying that racism is a thing of the past. This case represents the most effective rebuttal to that mythology I know.
Chestnut and Al Pyries, another lawyer on the case, hold regular meetings of black farmers. This one is in Chula, Mississippi. You said that this lawsuit is about money.
It is. It's about white people afraid to admit that they don't want to give black people what they should have got. It's all about money.
But money for whom? How does the Agriculture Department determine who deserves what? And for that matter, who has really been mistreated and who might just be jumping on the bandwagon of an explosive political issue?
There are some of the cases that have been filed that do not justify relief and ought not to be settled and ought to be dismissed. But there are an awful lot of cases that are legitimate and justifiable, and we have to differentiate between the two.
Secretary of Agriculture Glickman told us he feels the department should settle complaints on a case-by-case basis. But the lawyers in the class action suit don't see it that way. Don't you have to examine the merits of each case?
No, because the pattern in every single one of them is the same. It's the same thing, which is file a discrimination complaint, government doesn't process it. That's denial of due process every single time.
I just can't give somebody a check because they come in and ask for one. I do still have to prove the case. And by the way, it may just be that the farmers may get a little more money and the lawyers may get a little less money with some of these administrative settlements than it will come with the class action.
Some people, like the class action lawyers, for example, say that the Department of Agriculture is racist from top to bottom. There are other people who will tell you that there really is no big problem here. Where's the truth?
Somewhere in between. I think we have some racism in the department. And if there's anything different in the department than you'd find elsewhere, I think we have too many people that's willing to tolerate racism.
Some farmers have told me that they regard the Department of Agriculture as the last plantation.
I can understand why they would. Hopefully that's changing and it's going to change.
But for the 600 black farmers in the lawsuit, things aren't changing fast enough. Remember Eddie Ross? A year ago, the government agreed to settle his discrimination complaint for a reported $500,000. But Ross is still waiting for the bulk of the money because for the past year, the government has maintained that there is a statute of limitations on the complaints he filed before 1993. And they're now telling you that even though your complaints are valid, they can't pay you for those complaints because they're too old, even though for the period in which you had those complaints, they had no system in place to deal with it.
Correct. That's exactly what they're telling us.
Seem fair to you?
No, they're punishing us for their faults.
Just last month, Congress voted to eliminate the statute of limitations. So in theory, Ross should finally get his money. But to date, that has not happened. In the meantime, Ross is back doing work for white farmers and often goes by the land he almost worked for himself.
I drive by that farm quite often, and it gives me the feeling that I've been cheated and that the promise of the American way is for certain people. And as of now, I feel that I'm not one of those people.
This past week, the government made an offer to settle the farmers' class action lawsuit for an undisclosed amount of money. Lawyers for the farmers say the offer is under serious consideration and that an official settlement could be announced as early as next week.
On my desk, I'll get a letter I think ought to be answered, and I put it in a pile of letters to be answered. The next day, I get more mail with more letters to be answered, and I put those on top of yesterday's pile, and so on. Here's one from J.B. Bingman of Princeton, New Jersey. I don't know whether J.B. is a man or a woman. For years, I have felt an affinity while reading your column and seeing you on 60 Minutes. You say you don't like photos of yourself. I have the same problem. I don't like photos of you either. P.S. Could you possibly send me an autographed photo? Nice letter from David Kaczynski, who made the agonizing decision to turn in his brother Ted Kaczynski before he killed someone else. 3 weeks ago, I referred to Joe Rosenthal's famous picture of the flag raising on Mount Suribachi and said it may have been staged. Parker Albee, a historian at the University of Southern Maine, and General C.C. Krulak, Commandant of the Marine Corps, both write to assure me it was not staged. Several people sent me the USA Today crossword puzzle with my name in it. 21 across is Tartangruni. The answer is Andy. When I was a little boy and people asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I always said, I want to be 21 across in a crossword puzzle. This is a postcard that goes right to the point. Shut up, we've heard enough. Earl Ogletree writes to say he enjoys my sometimes amusing monologue on 2020. Bishop Samuel Threats of Cleveland is trying to build a new church. I beg of you to be generous, he writes, and help me to raise $500,000. Kindly make your check payable to the House of God. The favor of a speedy reply is requested. Well, I don't know about 500,000, Bishop, but I did get 2 checks in the mail the other day, and it may put me in shape to help you out. Here's a check for $3,000 from Chrysler. You've gotten these things? I mean, is this any way to sell Jeeps? And then I got this check. You've all heard of the big money people on television make? For instance, I was on the David Letterman show several years ago, and the money from that is still pouring in. Look what I got in the mail. A check from Letterman's company for 74 cents. First thing you know, I'll have enough money to retire on.
A Michigan man in the final stages of Lou Gehrig's disease. Dr. Kevorkian has been charged with murder and is in custody awaiting trial. Because of the controversy triggered by the broadcast, CBS News commissioned a poll. 1,158 Americans nationwide were interviewed last week with these results. Most Americans would permit doctor-assisted suicide by a patient who is terminally ill and wants to die, 52% to 37%. And they would allow the doctor to administer the lethal drugs, as Kevorkian did, by a margin of 47 to 46%. As for the charge of murder, 19% said it's appropriate, 27% would charge Kevorkian with a lesser crime, and 39% would not punish him in any way. Finally, did 60 Minutes do right in broadcasting the moment of death? Of our total sample, 42% said no, 40% said yes. But among those who actually saw the broadcast, 57% said we did the right thing to broadcast it. 31% said we did not. I'm Mike Wallace. We'll be back next week with another edition of 60 Minutes. And now here's what's coming up this week from CBS News.
Unique reparations.
Then on Wednesday, Titans of the Century, a look at 20 people who changed our lives, changed the way we live, the way we eat, even the way